At exactly 2:07 a.m., my phone buzzed beside the bed. It was my wife Elena. Her message contained only one sentence: "Don't wait for me tonight." I stared at it without replying. She had said she was meeting friends after work, but lately her explanations never seemed complete. She came home later, guarded her phone, and became irritated whenever I asked simple questions. 10 minutes after her message, I took one photograph. It showed my packed suitcase beside the front door, my wedding ring resting on top. I sent it with one sentence: "No one is waiting for you anymore." Then I turned off my phone. Within seconds, Elena called. I watched the screen light up repeatedly, but I didn't answer. Then came the messages. "What does that mean? Where are you going? Please answer me." I finally picked up. Her voice was angry, but underneath the anger was panic. She demanded to know why my suitcase was packed. I asked her a simple question: "Where are you right now?" She hesitated. Then she said she was still with her friends. I asked whether Marcus was there. Silence filled the phone. She finally whispered, "Yes." I closed my eyes. I had hoped I was wrong. Marcus was Elena's co-worker. For months, she'd insisted they were nothing more than friends. I'd never accused her without evidence, but I'd noticed enough to become suspicious. Earlier that week, I had discovered messages between them that went far beyond friendship. I didn't confront her immediately. Instead, I quietly spoke with an attorney and began preparing for the possibility that our marriage was ending. The photograph wasn't a threat or an attempt to frighten her. It was simply the first time I'd allowed her to see that I had made a decision too. She had stopped waiting for my permission to live however she wanted. So had I. Elena arrived home 25 minutes later. She rushed through the door and found my suitcase still sitting there. "You're leaving?" she asked. I told her I was. She immediately started crying. I asked whether Marcus had been with her. She admitted he had. Then she said nothing physical had happened. I told her that wasn't the point anymore. She had lied about where she was, lied about who she was with, and expected me to remain at home waiting for her return. She said she had been confused about our marriage. I told her confusion didn't require deception. If she wanted out, she could have simply said so. She sat on the couch and admitted that her relationship with Marcus had become emotional months earlier. They had been meeting privately and discussing a future together. She claimed she hadn't intended for things to go this far. I asked whether Marcus knew she was married. She nodded. I asked whether he believed she was leaving me. She said yes. That was the moment everything became clear. I wasn't dealing with a temporary mistake. Elena had already imagined a life without me while expecting me to remain available until she decided what she wanted. I told her that wasn't marriage. It was keeping someone as a backup plan. Elena begged me not to leave that night. I told her I wasn't making a permanent decision in the middle of an emotional argument. But I needed space, so I went to stay with my brother. Before leaving, I told her that we'd communicate through our attorneys about the house and finances until we could speak calmly. She asked whether I still loved her. I said, "I love the woman I married. I'm not sure who you've become." She started crying again. I walked out without another argument. For the first time in months, I wasn't trying to convince her to choose me. The next morning, Elena called repeatedly. She said Marcus had already begun distancing himself after learning that our marriage might end with lawyers involved. She couldn't understand why he wasn't answering her messages. I told her I wasn't interested in discussing Marcus. She said she had thought he wanted a future with her. I replied that she needed to ask him directly. I wasn't going to become her emotional safety net because her affair suddenly looked less attractive in daylight. She accused me of being cruel. I told her there was nothing cruel about refusing to rescue someone from consequences they had knowingly created. Over the next few weeks, I focused on separating my life from Elena's in a fair and legal way. I didn't empty our accounts or destroy her belongings. I documented our finances and worked through the proper legal process. Elena moved temporarily into her sister's apartment. She eventually admitted that Marcus had never promised the future she imagined. He enjoyed their secrecy but became uncomfortable when their relationship had real consequences. Elena told me she finally understood that she'd risked a stable marriage for a fantasy. I told her that realization was important, but it didn't erase what had happened. Months passed. Elena began counseling and asked whether I would consider couples therapy. I agreed, but only after we'd spent time apart. During our sessions, she admitted that she'd become unhappy but had never communicated it honestly. Instead, she'd look for validation outside the marriage. I acknowledged that I had sometimes been distant and overly focused on work. But I told her that my failures as a husband didn't make her affair inevitable. She accepted that distinction. For the first time, she stopped asking me to forget what happened and started asking what rebuilding trust would actually require. We eventually decided to reconcile, but only after nearly a year apart. There were strict boundaries, honest conversations, and countless moments when the past resurfaced. Elena understood that forgiveness wasn't the same as forgetting. I understood that rebuilding trust didn't mean pretending I had never been hurt. We both had to create a marriage where difficult truths could be spoken before they became secret lives. Slowly, we succeeded. Not perfectly, but honestly. And that mattered more than trying to recreate the relationship we'd had before. One evening, Elena found the photograph from that night saved on my phone. She looked at it and smiled sadly. "You really meant it," she said. I nodded. She asked whether I wanted her to come home that night. I told her I hadn't known what the future would hold. At 2 a.m., I wasn't trying to punish her. I was telling her that I couldn't spend another night waiting for someone who had already chosen another life. The photograph of my suitcase and wedding ring wasn't revenge. It was the first honest picture of where our marriage stood. She had texted, "Don't wait for me tonight," expecting me to remain exactly where she'd left me. 10 minutes later, I sent one photograph and changed the meaning of those words forever. "No one is waiting for you anymore." She thought she was telling me when she would return. In reality, she had given me permission to stop waiting altogether. And sometimes, the moment you stop waiting for someone to choose you is the exact moment you finally choose yourself.